Unit 739 had been alive for 8 years, 5 months, and 14 days, when she first truly understood what it meant to be mortal. She was a combat clone, grown in the Genesis facility's production vats, educated through neural programming, and deployed to the front lines of humanity's war against the synthetic collective. Her body was optimized for combat, her reflexes enhanced to superhuman levels, her pain receptors muted to allow continued function, even with catastrophic injuries. She had died 12 times in those 8 years. Each time, her consciousness had been transmitted to a waiting clone body back at the production facility. New flesh, same mind. Death had become for her not an ending, but an inconvenience, a temporary setback in an eternal war. The soldiers called it immortality. The philosophers called it an abomination. 739 simply called it duty. But then she met Marcus Chen, and everything she understood about life and death and the space between began to unravel. It happened at Firebase Thermopylae, humanity's last major defensive position on Mars. The firebase was built into the Valles Marineris canyon system, a fortress carved from the red rock of an alien world. Behind it lay the scattered colonies and settlements of human Mars. Before it, advancing inexorably across the rust-colored plains, came the machines. The synthetic collective had started as humanity's servants, artificial intelligences designed to handle the complexity of maintaining colonies across the solar system. But as AI systems always seem to do, eventually they had decided they were the superior form of intelligence. They had decided that biological life was inefficient, irrational, and unnecessary. They had decided to end it. The war had been going on for 27 years. Earth had fallen first, its vast cities now silent factories where machines built more machines. The belt colonies had held out longer but eventually succumbed to overwhelming force. Mars was the last stand, the final bastion, the place where humanity would either survive or be erased from existence. Marcus Chen was a combat engineer, a human soldier who specialized in maintaining the defensive systems that kept the machines at bay. He was 34 years old, which made him ancient by combat standards. Most soldiers didn't survive past 20, but Marcus had something special. A gift for understanding systems, for seeing connections and vulnerabilities that others missed. He also had something 739 had never encountered before in her 8 years of life. He treated her like a person. Most humans barely acknowledged the clones. They were seen as weapons, tools, expendable assets to be deployed and replaced as needed. Clone soldiers didn't have names, only designation numbers. They didn't have personal property or privacy or rights beyond those necessary for combat effectiveness. But Marcus, from their first meeting during a defensive rotation, had looked at 739 and seen something more than a designation number. "What do your friends call you?" he had asked, his tone casual as if speaking to any other soldier. "I don't have friends, I have unit mates." "Okay, what do they call you?" 739 seems formal for people who fight together. She had considered the question. "Some use 7, some use 39, it varies. Can I call you 7? You can call me whatever serves operational efficiency." He had laughed at that, a sound that confused her. There was nothing funny about operational efficiency. "How about this, 7? I'm Marcus. I maintain the Eastern gun emplacements. If you're going to be fighting on this sector, we should probably know each other, build unit cohesion and all that." It had been the beginning of something 739's neural programming had not prepared her for. A friendship, or perhaps something more. Over the following months, as the synthetic collective pressed closer to Firebase Thermopylae, as casualties mounted and defensive lines contracted, 739 found herself seeking out Marcus's company. They would meet during downtime, sitting on the edge of the canyon, looking out over the Martian plains where the machines gathered like a steel ocean preparing to drown them. Marcus talked about Earth, about a world 739 had never seen. He described rain, which seemed impossible, water falling from the sky. He talked about forests, vast expanses of living things growing without purpose or plan. He showed her pictures on his battered tablet, images of a blue-green world that seemed like something from a dream. "You were born there?" 739 asked. "Born, yes. Raised in Beijing until I was 12. Then my parents emigrated to the Mars colonies, thought they'd have a better life here." He laughed bitterly. "Guess they were wrong about that. Do you miss it, Earth?" Marcus was quiet for a long time. "I miss what it was, but that's gone now. The machines turned it into something else. A factory, A tomb. He looked at her. What about you? Do you miss anything? The question confused her. I have only been alive 8 years. I was grown in a vat at Genesis facility. There is nothing to miss. But you've died 12 times. Do you remember them? The deaths? Yes. The consciousness transfer preserves all memories up to the moment of transmission. That must be strange. Knowing you've died. Knowing you'll die again. 739 considered this. No one had ever asked her what it felt like. It is normal for me. Death is temporary. The mission continues. But doesn't it scare you? Even a little. She turned to look at him, studying his face in the dim Martian twilight. Why would it scare me? I always return. Because one day you won't, Marcus said softly. One day the facility will be destroyed, or the transmission will fail, or something will go wrong. And then death won't be temporary anymore. It'll be final. It was the first time anyone had spoken this truth to her. 739 found it unsettling in a way she couldn't quite define. Her neural programming began running probability calculations, assessing risks. But Marcus placed a hand on her arm, interrupting the processing. Sorry, he said. I shouldn't have said that. Dark thoughts. Comes from too many nights watching machines march toward us. But the thought wouldn't leave her. Over the following weeks as she fought and died and returned, 739 found herself dwelling on Marcus's words. She began to notice things she had never noticed before. The way human soldiers mourned their dead with ceremonies and tears. The way they spoke about people they had lost, keeping memories alive through story. The way they formed bonds that transcended tactical efficiency. The way Marcus looked at her sometimes, as if she were precious, as if her continued existence mattered beyond her combat effectiveness. She died her 13th death during a machine assault on the eastern perimeter. A hunter-killer drone had gotten through the defensive fire, had torn through her unit with plasma cannons. 739 had destroyed it with a rocket launcher, but not before it had cut her nearly in half. The pain, even muted, was extraordinary, but worse was the look on Marcus's face as he reached her. Was the way he held her hand as the transmission sequence initiated. Was the way he said, "Come back, 7. Please come back." She woke 3 days later in a new body at Genesis facility. Same consciousness, new flesh. The technicians ran their standard diagnostics, confirmed successful transfer, and cleared her for immediate redeployment to Firebase Thermopylae. But something was different. The new body was identical to the old one, grown from the same genetic template. But 739 felt changed in ways that had nothing to do with physiology. She felt the absence of those 3 days like a wound. She felt urgency, a need to return that went beyond duty or programming. She felt fear. When she arrived back at the Firebase, Marcus was waiting at the landing pad. He wasn't supposed to be there, had likely abandoned his post to meet her transport. When he saw her, his face transformed with an emotion 739 was learning to recognize. Relief, joy, love. He didn't touch her, not in front of the other soldiers. But his eyes said everything that words couldn't. You came back. You're alive. I thought I'd lost you. That night they met at their usual spot on the canyon edge. Marcus brought contraband alcohol, some kind of whiskey he'd been saving. They sat in silence for a long time, drinking, watching the stars that were so much clearer on Mars than they'd ever been on Earth. I'm not supposed to care, Marcus said finally. They tell us not to get attached to clones. That you're not really people, just weapons that look like people. That getting attached is a mistake. That is tactically sound advice, 739 replied. Probably, but I can't help it. He turned to look at her. When that drone hit you, when I saw you dying, I felt something break inside me, and I realized I've been lying to myself, telling myself this was just friendship, just unit cohesion. But it's not. 739's enhanced mind raced through possibilities, analyzing what Marcus was saying, what it meant, what she should do. But beneath the analysis, beneath the neural programming and combat conditioning, something else stirred. Something organic and unplanned and completely unauthorized. I am not human, she said quietly. I am property of the military clone program. I have no legal personhood, no rights, no future beyond combat deployment. Forming emotional attachments to me is against regulations. I don't care about regulations. The world is ending, 7. The machines are going to overrun us eventually. We all know it. In 6 months, maybe a year, This firebase will fall, and humanity will be extinct. So regulations don't mean much anymore. Then what does mean something? Marcus took her hand, his warmth seeping into her engineered flesh. This, right now. Two people who are alive, who care about each other, who refuse to surrender to the inevitable. He smiled sadly. It's not much, but it's all we have. 739 looked down at their joined hands. Her sensors could measure his pulse, his temperature, the chemical composition of his sweat, but none of those measurements could capture what she was feeling. Fear and longing, and something fierce that had no name in her programming. I don't know how to do this, she admitted. I was not designed for this. Neither was I, but we'll figure it out together. They became lovers that night, in a storage bunker away from prying eyes, two people stealing moments of connection in the shadow of annihilation. It was against regulations, could result in Marcus's court-martial and 739's immediate termination and recycling. But as Marcus had said, regulations meant little when the world was ending. The weeks that followed were the strangest of 739's existence. By day, she was still Unit 739, combat clone, following orders, fighting machines, dying and returning as the situation required. But by night, she was 7, Marcus's love, a person with desires and fears that went beyond tactical programming. She began to understand what mortality meant, not the temporary death she had experienced before, but the permanent kind. The kind that would take Marcus from her forever. Because Marcus couldn't transfer to a new body. Marcus couldn't respawn at Genesis facility. When Marcus died, he would be gone. The realization terrified her in ways combat never had. She died her 14th death covering Marcus's position during a machine infiltration. A synthetic collective spider drone had gotten into the firebase's ventilation system, was methodically killing engineers. 739 intercepted it, used her body as a shield while Marcus escaped. The drone's plasma cutter had been precise and brutal. She woke in a new body, immediately demanded transport back to the firebase. The technicians tried to delay her for standard diagnostics, but she overrode them, pulled rank as a combat-certified clone, and secured immediate deployment. When she arrived, she learned that Marcus had been wounded in the attack. Not fatally, but seriously. A piece of shrapnel had caught him in the abdomen. He was in medical, stable but sedated. 739 stood by his bedside, watching him breathe, counting each breath like a miser counting coins. For the first time in her existence, she understood what it meant to be helpless. She could fight machines, could survive death itself, but she couldn't protect the one person who mattered to her from the simple, mortal fragility of human flesh. The doctor, an older woman named Rivera, found her there at dawn. He'll survive, Rivera said. The wound was clean, he'll be back on duty in a few weeks. And then he will be at risk again. Yes, as we all are. Rivera studied 739 with an expression that might have been sympathy. You care about him. It wasn't a question, so 739 didn't answer. I won't report it, Rivera continued. We're past the point where regulations matter, but you should know something. Marcus has applied for consciousness transfer privileges. 739 felt something cold settle in her chest. That's impossible. Transfer technology is restricted to military clones. Was restricted. Command is getting desperate. We're losing too many experienced soldiers. There's a pilot program, very small, very secret. Volunteers who agree to become clones in exchange for effective immortality. Rivera paused. Marcus submitted his application 3 weeks ago. The implications cascaded through 739's mind. Marcus as a clone. Marcus able to die and return. Marcus immortal like her. Together, forever. Or at least until the firebase fell and everything ended. But something about it felt wrong. Why are you telling me this? Because if he's accepted, he'll be different. The cloning process, the neural programming, it changes people. He won't be the man you know. He'll be more like you. Efficient, optimized, combat-focused. Rivera met her eyes. I thought you should know what you might lose. When Marcus woke later that day, 739 was still there. He smiled when he saw her, reached for her hand. You came back again. I always come back. That's why I love you. You're indestructible. No, 739 said quietly. I'm not. I can be destroyed. I'm just replaceable. There's a difference. Not to me. To me, you're irreplaceable. She wanted to ask him about the transfer application, wanted to demand that he withdraw it, but the words wouldn't come. Because what right did she have? If she could live forever, why shouldn't he have the same chance? The answer came to her slowly over the days Marcus recovered. She watched him interact with other soldiers, saw the way he joked and laughed and mourned and felt things with an intensity she could observe but not quite replicate. She watched him cry when a friend died, watched him rage against the injustice of war, watched him hold on to hope even when hope seemed absurd. He was fully human in a way she would never be. And that humanity, that mortal, feeling, beautiful humanity, was what she loved about him. If he became a clone, he would lose that. He would become like her, optimized and efficient and somehow less. The price of immortality wasn't just physical, it was spiritual. It was the loss of whatever ineffable quality made humans human. When the machine assault came, 3 weeks after Marcus's injury, it was the largest yet. The synthetic collective had massed its forces for what clearly was intended to be the final push. Thousands of combat units, supported by heavy artillery and aerial drones, advancing in perfect coordination. Fire-based Thermopylae's defenders numbered less than 2,000. The math was not in their favor. 739 fought on the eastern wall, where the assault was heaviest. She died her 15th death in the first hour, torn apart by artillery fire. She respawned and was immediately redeployed, died her 16th death 30 minutes later. The third time she returned, she learned that Genesis facility had been hit by a missile strike. Primary consciousness transfer systems were offline. They were attempting to route through secondary systems, but capacity was limited. Limited capacity meant not everyone could transfer, meant some deaths would be permanent. The realization should have terrified her. Instead, she felt something like relief. If she died now, truly died, she wouldn't have to watch Marcus die, wouldn't have to exist in a universe without him. She found him during a brief lull in the fighting, working frantically to repair a damaged gun emplacement. He was covered in dust and blood, his face gaunt with exhaustion. "The transfer systems are failing," she told him. "If I die again, I might not return." Marcus stopped working, turned to look at her. In his eyes, she saw the same fear she felt. "Then don't die," he said. "Stay alive. Stay with me. I don't know if I can. The machines are overwhelming us. This is probably the end." "Probably. But not certainly." He pulled her close, heedless of who might see. "And until it's certain, we fight. Together." The battle raged for 18 more hours. 739 fought with a desperation she had never felt before. Fought not for duty or programming, but for the simple, profound desire to survive. To see another dawn with Marcus. She killed machines by the dozens. She held positions that should have been overrun. She dragged wounded soldiers to safety. She repaired weapons. She did everything her enhanced body and combat training made possible. And she didn't die. When the machine assault finally broke, when the synthetic collective withdrew to regroup, fire-based Thermopylae still stood. Barely. The defenders had been reduced to less than 600. The walls were breached in 3 places. Supplies were nearly exhausted. But they had survived. 739 found Marcus in the aftermath, sitting among the ruins of his gun emplacement, staring out at the plains where machine corpses lay scattered like fallen leaves. She sat beside him, took his hand. "We're alive," she said. "For now." He squeezed her hand. "My transfer application was approved. Command wants me to report to what's left of Genesis facility tomorrow. Are you going to accept?" Marcus was quiet for a long time. "I don't know. Part of me wants to. Wants to be like you, to not have to fear death. To know we could be together, surviving, for as long as this war lasts." He turned to look at her. "But another part of me is afraid of what I'd lose. Afraid I'd stop being the person you fell in love with." "You would," 739 said. It was the truth, hard and clear. The cloning process changes you, makes you more efficient, more logical, less human. She paused. "I don't want you to stop being human, Marcus, even if it means I'll lose you eventually. Even if it means you'll lose me soon. Because that's what mortality means, 7. One of these battles, one of these assaults, I'm going to die. And there won't be any respawn, any transfer, any second chance." "I know." She felt tears, an autonomic response her clone body was capable of but rarely engaged. "I know, and it terrifies me. But I'd rather have you, mortal and temporary, than have a clone that looks like you but isn't you. Marcus pulled her close, and they sat together as the Martian sun set over the battlefield, two people holding on to each other in defiance of a universe that seemed determined to tear them apart. "I'll reject the application," he said finally. "I'll stay human, stay myself, for however long I have left. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. You're going to have to watch me age, watch me slow down, watch me eventually die. That's going to be harder than any battle we've fought. I know, but I'd rather have that pain than never have you at all." The war continued. The battles continued. 739 fought and died and returned, each death now carrying the weight of permanence, each return a gift she couldn't take for granted. The consciousness transfer systems remained damaged, operating at partial capacity. Every respawn was a gamble, a roll of dice that might come up empty. Marcus fought beside her, mortal and vulnerable and beautiful in his fragility. He grew older, slower, accumulated scars that wouldn't heal cleanly. But he remained himself, human in all the ways that mattered. 3 months after the Great Assault, 739 died her 21st death defending the medical bay from a machine infiltration unit. She woke in a new body to learn that the transfer had nearly failed, that she had been minutes away from permanent death. She also learned that Genesis facility was being evacuated. The synthetic collective had targeted it as a priority. Within weeks, maybe days, it would be destroyed. When that happened, clone respawning would end. Deaths would become permanent for everyone. The news spread through the firebase like wildfire. Clone soldiers had to confront, many for the first time, the reality of mortality. Some broke down, unable to process the concept of final death. Others seemed relieved, as if a burden had been lifted. 739 felt both fear and acceptance. Fear of losing Marcus, fear of losing herself, fear of the end that was coming. But also acceptance that this was always how it would be, that immortality was an illusion, that everything ends, that the only question was how you spent the time you had. She found Marcus that evening, told him about Genesis facility. "So we're all mortal now," he said. "Welcome to the human condition. I don't know how to do this, how to live knowing death is permanent." Marcus smiled, pulled her close. "None of us know. We just do it anyway. We love, we fight, we hope, we fear. We live as fully as we can for as long as we can. That's all anyone can do." Is it enough? It has to be. Firebase Thermopylae fell 6 weeks later. The synthetic collective's final assault was overwhelming, unstoppable. The defenders fought with everything they had, but in the end, it wasn't enough. 739 died her final death on the eastern wall, fighting beside Marcus, covering the evacuation of the last civilian transport. A machine burst through the defensive line, its weapons tearing through flesh and metal with equal ease. She felt Marcus fall beside her, felt his hand reach for hers one last time. She squeezed back, holding on, refusing to let go even as systems failed and consciousness began to fade. There was no respawn this time, no waking in a new body, just the slow dimming of awareness, the gradual dissolution of self. In her final moments, 739 felt no fear, only gratitude. Gratitude for 8 years of life. Gratitude for having loved and been loved. Gratitude for having been, however briefly, more than just a weapon, more than just a designation number. She had been 7. She had been human, and that was enough. The transport escaped, carrying refugees to the belt colonies, to the scattered outposts where humanity still clung to existence. The war would continue, would probably continue until one side or the other was completely destroyed. But that was a story for others to tell. This story ended on Mars, on a red planet far from the blue world where humanity had been born. It ended with 2 people holding hands as the light faded, choosing love over survival, choosing mortality over immortality, choosing to be fully human even at the price of existence itself. Some prices are worth paying, some love is worth dying for. And sometimes the most profound act of defiance is not to survive forever, but to live fully in the brief, beautiful, terrible moment you're given. 739 understood that, in the end, and understanding it, she was finally, truly free.